Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Catholic Founders Podcast. This is the number one podcast for Catholic entrepreneurs and business owners to learn how to fully integrate our faith into our entrepreneurial endeavors. I apologize for the lack of audio quality here. I'm actually recording while I'm traveling, so I do not have all my equipment, so bear with me. Today, we have a really interesting conversation with Sondre Rasch, the founder of Safety Wing. Heads up, this is a bit of a longer episode, so I will guarantee you, though, that every minute is very, very worth it. So Sondre is very, very interesting to listen to and to speak with. This is something I'm very excited. So Sondre is based in he's based in San Francisco. He's actually a convert to the faith, and he's a two-time YC founder. For those of you who are unfamiliar, YC means Y Combinator. It's basically the most prestigious tech accelerator in effectively in the world. You can maybe argue it's not the most prestigious, but people really put a lot of respect behind it. So, of course, we discuss his conversion journey, of course. But given that he's, working in tech at the heart of Silicon Valley, and, especially with his involvement with YC, we wanted to ask him specifically what it's like to be a Catholic in Silicon Valley, in tech. And we were also able to learn some of the ways that he changed his view on business and entrepreneurship in general after converting. But that's not all. So we also discussed how he's seen more success in his endeavors after becoming Catholic, and we also discussed the connection between being, it's maybe an out of vogue term, but being a techno-optimist and a Catholic, and how to reconcile the two. We even went slightly deeper into that conversation and kind of discussed being a Catholic and this idea of transhumanism, the transhumanism movement, and we discussed kind of the relationship of those two things and how some of them work and some of them are a little too far. And then towards the end, he also shared some tactical ideas on how Catholics can actually take back the culture, including some of thoughts on specifically getting into local politics, which is actually something he did much earlier in his career. So he was able to share some of those experiences. And then we wrap up with a discussion on how to discern if you're called to do ambitious things and effectively how to deal with that ambition in general. So there's a lot in here. I would say take your time getting through it, and be sure to get a notepad out. It's definitely a little bit of a longer episode, but take your time getting through it. I think we're going to end up only putting out one episode, this episode, in the next 2 weeks. We probably won't put an episode out next week, so feel free to take your time going through it. I think it's a very, very valuable episode. You can learn a lot from. We will be putting out additional content, kind of digging deeper into a few of the concepts later on. But given that I'm traveling these next few weeks, I'm a little bit short on time. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. I know I certainly enjoyed recording it. So you enjoy, and let us know your thoughts at the end. All right, welcome to the show, Sondre. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. So it's great to be here.
I'm really excited to have you. As a little bit of background for people, I got to hear you speak at the Cent Summit this past year. So right now we're recording this in January 2025, but in September of 2024, I heard you speak, and you had a lot of really good insights. You were the only person on the panel who wasn't building a publicly Catholic company, but definitely a Catholic founder. So I'm excited to, I guess, get into your story. Let's maybe just give us the rundown of who you are and kind of your journey into entrepreneurship, if you will.
Into entrepreneurship, yeah. So my I'm born in Norway, where I'm currently sitting, and I very early on, 12, 13, 14, I somehow discover entrepreneurship on the internet. I realize I want to move to Bay Area and become a startup founder. I become interested in programming, making websites. I start a web hosting service, and not as a startup the way we know today, but more but kind of like selling products. So that was like the early stage, and but the first one, kind of real startup, is many years later. After college, after I worked a little bit in politics, I quit my job, started what became superside.com, and also then applied to Y Combinator, finally realized that goal of moving to the Bay Area, and a few years later started Safety Wing.
What was the first company doing, just as out of curiosity?
Superside is a freelancer platform. So it's kind of Well, if you go there now, right, what you will, it's become a really good product. It's almost the way it works today is you can get super high quality design services. Like imagine you want to make videos and stuff, but if you're an
Hmm.
enterprise, and you get like your own team there. So I mean, we use the product. It's like SafeDoing also uses the product.
Okay, nice.
So it's like instead of like kind of like a half an employee, like that's their minimum package. We get like a lot of design skills that we don't have on our team. But most of their customers are big, like Amazon is their biggest customer, big
Hmm.
companies. They use it to scale faster and be flexible.
Wow, wow, that's awesome. What was the, I guess if you don't mind sharing, what was the outcome of that company? Because that was the first company you founded, and then you said that the second company was Safe Doing, which is what got you into Y Combinator, correct?
Well, I actually did YC twice with
Oh, you
both
did. Okay.
companies. Yeah. The outcome, well, it still is being realized. So Superside is definitely on track to, making it. I would say it's, but yeah, I left to start Safe Doing, and am now, but very good friends with the company, and in some sense, Safe Doing was born in there, and they're one of our biggest customers, and we're customers of theirs. And I talk to a co-founder, Frederick, often. But I sold some shares in one round, but the sort of exit is still in the
Hmm.
future for
Yeah,
Superside.
got it.
But
Okay,
there's
cool.
like I think it's now 700-800 people who work there.
Oh wow, that is pretty impressive. Not many people can put that feather in their cap. I guess tell us a little bit then the story of your kind of conversion to the faith and how that relates to. We'll get into the entrepreneurship piece of how it relates to that, but just tell us how you ended up finding the faith.
Yeah, so I moved to the Bay Area, and um, I should add, I didn't say that earlier, but I was raised in this sort of lukewarm Lutheran situation that you have in
Hmm.
Norway, and I think that a lot of people in the West, actually, like in the US too, can relate to
Hmm.
this sort of lukewarm Christianity that it somehow lost its core, uh, and you can debate where exactly that originated, but that was the situation. And I found that the questions, as I was asking, like in confirmation classes, the answers I was getting from the teacher were not satisfactory. And then got on board with a sort of new atheist train, Hitchens, Dawkins, Dennett, Hitchens, Dawkins, and at least, and Sam Harris, and was enthused about this for a while. And I think it's like 26, 28 years old. At 27, 28, I moved to San Francisco, and then this started to crack a little bit. So this is what, with 2014, 2015, 2015. And I I sort of I go on a long journey. It's kind of like an insight driven journey that eventually led to me converting to Catholicism in 2019. But if I were to mention like one point, one moment on that journey, is I remember I lived in this co-living house in Woodside, outside of Palo Alto, and it was a lovely place. It was like on the edge of a forest with like very old trees. So like every day I would go for a walk in this like redwood forest. Um, and yeah, one day I was just reading this, I think it was National Geographic article about if you walk, like they did this experiments that if you walk blindfolded in a desert, like why do you tend to like kind of walk in a sort of in a circle, like it's, and the article explained that it's not some kind of special homing, like people had theories that are incorrect. It's just a random walk. It's just that when you walk, when you're not have some point, when you can't orient yourself, it random becomes circular.
Mm.
And then I remember going for this walk, and I had this long reflection on this point, because I've always been interested in goal setting, reaching goals, and 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 so I had this thought process was like, how do I avoid walking in a circle like in my life, right? By setting one goal after another, how do I avoid essentially, if that's a random walk, I'll just go around one point. And for some reason, it just clicked to me that, oh, that's what heaven is. It's the sort of final goal. And that's what, and I didn't mean like, oh, that's, I immediately clicked to me that that's what it should be. I just meant more like psychologically, like that's what it is for them.
Hmm.
You know, like that's, it is orienting mechanism that prevents you from going in a circle. And I had a couple of other insights that followed like directly from that. I remember on the same trip, like how some of these values, which in Catholicism we call theological values, truth, goodness, and beauty, they're sort of these vectors. Vectors is a mathematical term. So there's like an arrow. There's like an arrow that points towards something. And yeah, anyway, that I sort of immediately clicked together that that's what they are too. They're like vectors pointing towards heaven. Very fortunate. I haven't actually read anyone saying that those exact things later. It was just like a stumble upon insight. But this was a very key kind of part in my intellectual journey. It was like, oh, there is something very valuable here.
Hmm. So it sounds to me that you had already a mentality of kind of reflecting on things that you read about. Because I mean, there's a lot of people read things, but they wouldn't put a lot of extra thought into this study of the wandering in the desert. It's kind of interesting. You say that if you put it blindfolded on the desert, you walk in circles. It maybe sounds kind of like the exile, the 40 years in the desert when it shouldn't have taken that long. Maybe just
Yeah.
going in circles because they're blindfolded. But you obviously have some kind of an inquisitive spirit of like asking or reflecting on questions. Is that something you developed, or was that always kind of just who you are?
No, this is just who I am.
Yeah.
So I like sit in my room at like 14 years old, listening to like philosophy lectures and like obsessing over it. So no, this is just my whole life.
Do you know where that came from? Like where that attitude came from? Was it influenced by something around you growing up or by your parents?
There are some light elements in it, but there's it's hard for me to point to anything. It's not like my parents aren't really like me in this way.
Hmm.
I used to like now as the older I get, the more I'm like, oh, I'm similar to my parents in this way. But certainly 10 years ago, I would more say like I grew up on the internet. I'm nothing like
Yeah, yeah.
uh, yes, I grew up in a place, but I wasn't caused. It's kind of like that, which is something actually I later learned in Catholicism, which is this idea of telos. Like it can something be caused by its final destination. But certainly, I do think that we underestimate. Like always growing up, when I was annoyed by this question, like how did you end up here? Like coming to terms, how did you end up here? Looking at your past, there's like nothing that would like ping you over here, like the bowling ball you are. And I was like, it wasn't, I caused it when I wrote down my goal. Like,
Hmm.
it didn't happen to me. But no, it's more like I think, I definitely have parents who are fairly, my dad's, entrepreneurial. My mom is like sort of intellectual, reasoned, examine
Hmm.
style. We always had a lot of discussion. So, definitely it was an environment where you might be interested. But I'm also a bit extreme and obsessive. It's
That's all
just
right.
like a combination of traits, I think.
Yeah, I do find that a lot of people who end up building companies like in earnest, not just kind of some side project, they tend to have that type of willingness to reflect on the seemingly ordinary things, and they can find interesting pieces out of it. So I was just curious about that. So once you kind of made this connection, I'm assuming was it just a process of elimination to understand? Okay, I was Lutheran, but let me try to figure out what the faith means. And after a lot of research, you eventually came to Catholicism. Is that correct?
Um, no, I mean, my research, this is like a multi-year period, so I can draw out moments, but I can't cover everything. However, I do remember a point, which is much later than what the story I said earlier, where I was sort of convinced, like, yes, Christianity is true. Which denomination should I join? And I just used whatever reasoning tools I had at the time, and I had no knowledge of Catholicism. And I remember I was looking at growth rates for various denominations. I was like, growing fast must be good. uh, and It was a bit fortunate. It was a bit random, actually, that I came across. It was actually meeting my now wife, Joanna, who introduced me to Catholicism, and that was a key reason. Like our first date, she brought me to mass, kind of, and well, she asked if I wanted to go, and I was like, and I was in the middle of this searching period and like going to different places, and I was disappointed in a lot of what I saw because I felt like a lot of them were like they were sort of too emotional, too sort of up in their language and appeal, and it just didn't speak to me. And it's not like I don't understand that there are people where that works for, but just I'm not one of them. But then I went to this Dominican church, and I'm like, the priest speaks in a language that I can fully understand, and like this makes total sense. Um, so it was Jonah who introduced me to Catholicism, and then later, of course, as I then went into it, then it suddenly like 100% clicked, and I had no idea what I was even thinking before, but I didn't have the knowledge. Like I just didn't know enough about Catholicism. I saw someone say that I think on Twitter today, that it's like Protestantism isn't going to survive, the internet, and there is something to that, right? Because the knowledge that I have now, it's very hard to know that and not convert to Catholicism if you think you're a follower of Christ. So I think that there is something to that.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I never explored that idea, but I can imagine. It's for me. It's like once I fully understood that, I very very much believe in the Eucharist. It's like you can't go back. It's the red pill. It's like it's impossible to go back because nobody else has that, right? So, once you kind of fast forwarding a little bit, once you did convert, like, is there any particular way that you viewed business differently post conversion?
Yeah. So I had one example. If you can forgive me for not fast forwarding, because this is in the same period. This is in like the conversion, early conversion period. It's actually quite early, but it is illustrative. So I remember I was in that period where I was curious about Christianity, but I was reading it as an atheist, and I was on my bike listening to an audiobook back from Palo Alto to Woodside, and I was listening to this book, and they went through actually just in the desert, which we just talked about, and it was a reflection on that, and I just somehow I hadn't heard it before, and it just like hit me like a brick, and like something just goes home. Like I hadn't cried for like five. I'm not a crier, and I had to like get off my bike, and I was like completely bawling, and then I went home, and the first thing I did was that I completely redid my pitch deck. I was pitching my seed round at the time. And the reason was I was like, I suddenly had this new moral clarity where I was like, oh, a lot of this stuff is kind of dishonest, actually. So I'm just going to take it away. Um, which is, yeah, I mean, I was actually very particular about being honest at the time, but it's a new perspective where suddenly, like, there's a lot of things that you can't continue doing once you've seen it from that perspective.
So I guess just generally, some things like your whole mentality changes a little bit because you have a different like lens of how you view things. You say, oh, like now that I'm being honest with myself, I know that these couple things that I was like, oh yeah, 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 that's definitely true. It didn't really feel right to you.
Yeah, I exactly. And I should add, there are also many things that have changed how to deal with people. That isn't, I haven't changed it that much, but um, it's a lot easier to be consistent about, which is Something I talk about inside the company a lot, which is this idea that like I can't remember which book this is from, but it's essentially like there are three levels to existence. There's like the objective layer, it's like you have your goals, and there's the subjects, meaning people, like subject meaning not meaning subject, like people with a point of view, and then there's like the ideals or God on top, and the point is that you can't objectify people like because that's actually the wrong way to look at the world. Like you can't just use them as like tools to get to your goals. You have to in a way take into account that they have their own things that they want. This is in a way just it's a way to get to like the Christian worldview of people in a way, but
Mhm.
I thought it was very helpful to me, and I think that's been one major another change I would say is like just how I view people.
Hmm. Are there any other, I guess, things that you maybe not things that you did in the past, but things that now that you're Catholic and you look at the world of building startups that you just think, okay, there are these like one or two or three maybe core principles or core things that absolutely must be different if you're building a company as a Catholic versus just you don't have a set of Catholic morals that go along with it.
Yeah, I mean, there are, and I think I mentioned this at Cent as well, like this, framework of like do good, don't do evil. Like I think that's, and of course our tradition has explored those two questions, so you don't have to start from scratch and figure everything out on your own. And so there are certain things you can't do because doing them would be wrong
Hmm.
uh, in that sense. But but I also wanted to say, what I also was very much on in the sort of Cent context, and what I often talk about with Catholic entrepreneurs, which is that I try to turn it a bit on its head, which is to talk about how being Catholic can be an advantage as a founder, and I'm sure we're getting to that, but just I do think it can be, right. So if you talk about ambition, so being ambition is likely helps you succeed with anything, like wanting it more drive, having higher goals, etc. But within Catholicism, I think, or within like people struggle with it because, and for a good reason, and that's because there is bad ambition, which is selfish ambition. Like if I just want something because it gives me more things or power or status, right, or prestige, that would be bad. But if I am ambitious because I am answering a great calling, right, that's not bad. But for an outsider, those two things can look the same. You know what I mean? Like when Jonah was called to go to Nineveh and he doesn't want to do it. Like imagine that today. It's like you being called to go to China and convert China. And it's like, see, this is ambitious.
Yeah.
It's very ambitious, right? It's like, it's very easy for someone outside to be like, oh, that's hubris, right? Who are you? Like, what do you, like, and it's like it's conflict, but it doesn't actually. Like the what makes it good or bad is the source of the ambition. It's the
Hmm.
intention. It is, are you meeting a great calling, or is it selfish ambition? And that is just something you have to, I think, investigate. And you shouldn't take it for granted. I don't think this is like a cop out either. I do think that anyone trying to do great things, and I do, like, has to scan their own heart again and again, like to be sure.
Yeah, ambition is a topic I oftentimes talk about with my friends around this area of central Wisconsin, which is not exactly known to be the most ambitious place.
Sorry to interrupt. I did want to take a moment to thank you for your support of this endeavor. And as a reminder, if you do prefer to read, you can get a blog version of this show later this week, or if you're listening in the future, there is a blog version of this show available for you to read. The full version of that blog version of the episode will only be available to paid subscribers unless I decide, to make it free at some point. Probably not, not most likely. So if you like what you see and what we're doing, and you want to support us, consider becoming a paid subscriber today. You will get access to all the written content, or written versions of the show, I should say. And for a limited time, we're also willing to give annual paid subscribers annual paid membership to access to our Catholic Founders community. So this is basically a place where you can find peers who are also dealing with similar struggles. Other Catholics that you can talk to about business and how to deal with your certain, challenges that you're working on. So you can message them anytime you like. There'll be special content that's created there sometimes. Sometimes we have special presentations by members who, are willing to share some things with the group, but don't necessarily want to publish to the world. So yes, please do consider becoming a paid member today if you enjoy the work we're doing. All right, back to the show.
I try to discern this because I have a lot of ambition too, but how I always have a hard time discerning between, how much of what I'm pursuing is genuinely, do I genuinely perceive to be a calling versus how much of it is like my own kind of psychological, just like labeling it as a godly thing so that I can justify the ambition. Do you have any ways that you try to sort through this when you're planning for new objectives or things like that that you kind of try to filter out, like, is this a genuine thing that's from God or is it from me?
Yeah. Um, I mean, one thing that I like is this idea about my conscience. There is this, and this is a very daily thing. It's a bit unfortunate you can't turn it on the same way you can do other kind of ideas, but I'll definitely have these moments where it's like something sounds good or attractive, but like a still voice inside is kind of like this sucks, like, or the other way around, which is like there is no way to justify this, but somehow like this, like I'm inspired to do it. That's a really good guide I've found, and and this is also a guide that many people throughout history have found. So it's like I'm not the first, but this is definitely one of them. Um, you know, just interrogating your own goals is definitely a method. Like, why? And yeah. And then another that I've also like explored a lot with safe doing, is like, would this belong in God's kingdom? um, and so that's also like a way, and this can be used also on the margin, right? Without a clear like yes or no, but more like in what way, and how can it become, as beautiful enough to warrant such a thing. Yeah, those are some things I can think of.
Yeah, that's helpful. No, I like that a lot. I think that's very good. It's again, it is a challenge, and it's very easy for people who are ambitious to just kind of convince themselves of many things, right? Being a founder, you've got, especially when you raise VC money, you've got a lot of pressure to keep the company going so that you can succeed and return your investors' money. Also, make sure that your employees stay employed and you don't have to let anybody go. Do you have any different view of how you worry or have anxiety about the company and the success of the company post conversion? Is there something that's like really clear there of like, I don't have to worry about these things anymore because I know it's in God's hands?
Yes, I would say so. 5% less desperate probably, which is really good. I found is really helpful for risk taking behavior. I heard about like early Christians. One of the things that they did was that they were very inspiring to people around them because they acted in what even to modern Christians like incredibly selfless ways, and like you had it was very common to abandon Romans at the time, or the pagans at the time, were come to abandon their children or sick or even elderly, and then Christian families would take them in, and they would be like in poverty and have 10 children, and be like, God will provide, and still do it. Whether you act correctly with the correct intention, that is actually what matters. And then and that you can actually control as well. You not the outcome from any one action. That's much more complicated, and is influenced by things outside of your control. And turns out that is, that's where that prayer comes from in church, like which has gone popular in the secular world. I'm blanking on the words now, but to that discernment about whether I can, what does it say? Like,
Is it
care about.
grant me the grace to accept the things I can't change, and to act upon the things I can? That one?
Thank you. That one. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That is the sort of outcome of that. Like, why is that so important? Well, it is because then you're focused on your focus is in the proper place, which is in your heart, in your actions, and not trying to like control the whole universe outside of that, which isn't in your control anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can be focused on making the right choices and doing the right things, and being completely fine with the outcome, and accepting even death, right? Even death of your company, and right, in startup sense, and be completely okay with that. Not that you're okay with that, like that you're not even trying, not that
Exactly.
you're
Yeah.
apathetic, but that you're not doing that calculus when you're making any one decision, which is impossible.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, because it's impossible to imagine all of the possible outcomes anyway. So you might as well just like focus on this. Is how I guess you could say structured it when I started my company was, I know I'm going to work hard because I'll set aside time for my faith and for my family, and then like pretty much the rest of it will go to working. And if I fail after that, like it's because God didn't want me to win, right? So He maybe wants me to do something else, and that's kind of how I try to approach it. Is that I know it won't fail because I didn't work hard enough, because I know I'm putting the other things in the right place. So I just imagine it's much harder when you're running a larger company with a lot of people. I'm just a solo firm, so it's easy for me.
Right.
But
Right, but I should also hear, because this is also one where I have struggled with and not fully been in the beginning of my conversion, which is this. Um, there is this story which I'm not struggling to sort through, but yeah, it's the one about the planting the seeds, the sower. Do you remember
mhm.
that one? And that was actually, like, I remember, a great insight, and I came across this like way before conversion, and as part of like applying to colleges, and I learned this thing that when you apply to the top ones, even if you're perfect, you actually only have 20% score, right? So you have to apply to like 7 to even get yourself over 80. Even if if you're kind of just theoretically perfect, this is the idea of a funnel, and that this actually is the case everywhere. Like, anyone who's built a growth channel knows that there's a funnel, and you got to understand the numbers, right? So like, imagine that if you're fundraising, and you're like, make one pitch, and then it's like, oh, it didn't work. Like, well, at least I worked hard. Like, like that would be a mistake.
Mm.
God didn't want me to. No, that's like, you just are not understanding. Like, that's the sower keeps on sowing the seeds in a way. Like, it's not of your making that some VC says no. That's
Mhm.
not. You don't need to affect that. So yeah, I also wanted to add that nuance there. That I feel some people use that as a cop out to give up too soon.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it that way because that's not my mentality, but that makes a lot of sense that others could use that and say, "Oh, I pitched this one, I pitched the VC and it didn't work, so therefore I'm done." But
Yeah,
you have to, do like what Halo did and pitch many, 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 many companies until they
yeah,
finally get one, right? So I do want to talk about this. You mentioned, I think, at Cent as well, that you found a little bit more success in your second company, and you kind of ascribe a lot of it to your faith, right, and to your conversion to an extent. So can you talk a little bit more about that, and why you think that's true?
yeah. So I think that I mentioned two of the reasons previously. I should add that I don't think that this is a reason to do it, but I do think that Catholic Founders has an advantage properly understood, um, and without saying that therefore prosperity gospel is like there is nothing promised to us in a way. Uh, but I I think that um, one thing that struck me when I began interested in Catholicism is just I knew a lot, but I knew nothing about living a good life. Like I knew nothing about virtue or family or yeah. I mean, just those two things is like such a blind spot. um, but I knew a lot of kind of esoteric knowledge, but I didn't know a lot of the basics. That's really shocking to me, and then another is that while I would do ethical things for its own reason, it is clear that it benefits your reputation when you act like that. Okay,
Hmm.
so and to give one example here from the company, so we have this value in company aim for the ideal, and we say we use that as a guide and as a constraint, and as a constraint, there is the story from when COVID hit. So our company was particularly vulnerable to COVID due to the following, and we had a moral dilemma, and that was that when COVID hit, we had this rule in our insurance that if this U.S. agency put travel warning on any country, then we cover so-called political evacuation, meaning we cover evacuation out. But the only product we had at the time only worked abroad, which meant and this agency put travel warning on every country in the world, which meant that every single one of our customers qualified for evacuation, after which they would no longer be our customers. um, and and if everyone did that, we would die as a company. And so we had this very interesting discussion about this internally, and this like idealism as constraint was kind of like the winning point, and and so we decided to do it. We were like, okay, yeah, like this is the right thing to do, and therefore we have to do it. Kind of reasoning. That's the end of the reasoning. And we went very all in on it. So we had like 10 days till evacuation. We sent emails 5 days, 2 days. I and many others in the company set up like night after night, like assisting in evacuations. And in the end, a third of our customers did evacuate. So it's definitely not nothing. And but what happened then was that over the course of that summer, so one of the other alternatives for that product, Nomad Insurance, was this much larger company, World Nomads, and they did the exact opposite. They like stopped answering customer service, stopped selling. Like they were complete self-preservation mode,
Mm.
and that kind of spread, like how we acted during that time, and over the course of that summer, 20 of their top 40 ambassadors switched over to us. So from August to December in COVID year, we grew 300% downstream of this. So it actually like was super well. It worked out really well for us. So, but yeah, to qualify again, I don't think that that's why you should do the right thing. But I do think that it does have this, like, as long as you survive, it actually, like, people do notice, and people want to people want to associate, like, keep doing business with people who are, keep their promises and are honest, and, and do those kinds of things.
Hmm.
So obviously that helps. So even though you're acting moral for a different reason, it certainly helps in building a company as well.
Yeah, you can't go into it saying, "Oh, I'm going to be moral because it's just good for business," because then it's not really in your heart, right? If you don't do it in your heart, then you aren't actually who you say you are. You're a rotten potato masquerading as like a nice juicy apple or something, right?
Yeah.
And it's just not it's not going to end up right because eventually people start to smell it. I really like that example. I think it's something my original journey of this whole trying to discover this whole idea was when I started to get interested in building my own business of some sort. I always thought to myself, I can't imagine that a company that runs in a way where, the majority of the people who work there, especially the leaders, genuinely practice and genuinely pursue Christian virtue. I I cannot imagine that they would not be a more sustainable long-term company because of reputation and trust and these things that continue to erode further and further in our current age, especially the way employees are treated. I think is a huge one. Is that especially like my wife wants to work in healthcare, and I keep hearing all these examples of how just poorly the hospitals treat their employees, and it's like, okay, well, this is clearly like at some point this will change, right? It may take a while, but that is a negative thing that's kind of causing people to run away, and you can pursue virtue and it will come to you. And this is a really good example that you've shared of that. So I appreciate that. One thing you have probably an interesting perspective. If I understand correctly, you spend still a bunch of time every year in Silicon Valley, right? You're not always overseas.
Yes, I'm just home for Christmas. No,
Okay.
I live in San Francisco.
So I guess one thing I've never visited SF. I've been very curious about SF. I'm very much a techie, if you could say. I follow all the podcasts and all the main people there, but I've always wondered because there never feels to be any sort of faith coming from, let's call it, the main voices of let's call it technology in Silicon Valley. So how is it to be Catholic in Silicon Valley? Is it difficult to practice your faith? Do you find a lot of other people kind of who are actually kind of secretly also Catholic? Like how does that work for you?
Well, most of my friends would still be atheists, um, although I have more and more friends that I met in the church at this point. But still, like, my sort of founder friends would still be a majority atheist. I haven't had any negative reaction talking about my conversion, though, to atheist friends. Only interested positive ones. Um, and so, uh, but it there is a change happening, and it's quite major. Christianity has gotten over the years quite a good rep. This is a bit of a post woke thing, but the sort of whoever was not drawn into that frenzy kind of remains and has a lot more status in the Bay Area now, and some of those, right, are these, like, Peter Thiel associated people, and they're just more positive to Christianity. So just Christianity is, like, huge up in status actually over
Mm.
the last 4 years in the Bay Area, and you have people even like Gary Tan, the leader of Y Combinator, is, I don't know if he's Catholic, although I suspect he is because he says sort of Catholic things, but he's certainly Christian and public about it, and, like, hosts event about that in the house. There is, oh, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to out this, but there is a Christian founders Y Combinator group that has just exploded. It's been for many years, and I've been a part of it, and but it used to be like whatever, like 30, 40 or something, and now there's like 300, 400 people in that group.
Wow.
And it's super active, and they have, like, events all the time in San Francisco. So but this is very early days. But I should say that it was early days. Like, if you go back to 2015, 2014, 2015, when I first came to San Francisco, it was early days. Everything that happens there happens everywhere
Hmm.
after. it is something of the everything is downstream from there right now. I think mostly due to it being the center of the technology world, the
Hmm.
internet, and that's just being so big part of our world right now. Information spreads. So like every single subculture almost that was present then has kind of gone global in some way,
Hmm.
including social justice, including effective altruism, which is a lesser things, but yeah. So that's what I'm seeing now. It has changed, and it's now somewhat. It's definitely not as weird and frowned upon. Although in absolute numbers, it still is, right? You would
Hmm.
say like I don't know what the percentages are, 95% atheist or something like in the but in terms of stature or like in curiosity,
Hmm.
it's complete change, and that I think points to what we're heading into. And I think it's quite likely that we're heading into something. We at least have the potential to head into like something like a religious revival.
Yeah. That's really encouraging. I mean, I a while ago I read the book Peter Latimer had written. I haven't read his newest stuff, but the Long Boom, and his kind of argument is that whatever happens in California, kind of 10 years later, it kind of permeates the rest of at least America. His point was not necessarily the world, but I think at this point, because the world is more connected with the internet, it's kind of it has even greater effect, if you will. And I've noticed this with a lot of my secular friends who are, you know, very curious. They like to ask questions, and they're very, very inquisitive. They tend to ask me a lot of questions about like, why are you Catholic, man? It seems like such a such a hassle, but they're curious about something, right? So I'm very. If you're telling me that there's like a culture of this kind of popping up in Silicon Valley, I think that's good news for Catholicism and Christianity in general.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious about this, and I feel like you could probably relate to this. I'm somebody who very accidentally became, let's call it a techie. I'm just very fascinated. Like every time I hear about new tech, I'm just like wildly interested in it. I'm talking to my siblings, and they're just like, ah, whatever. Because I grew up with no internet, like in the backwoods of Wisconsin. It's just so random that I became into this. But I am really interested in it. But I'm also very into my faith, and I just wonder how you reconcile this kind of like, I don't know if you call it techno-optimism about the future with also being a really true believer in follower of God.
Um, yeah. I mean, I don't find that difficult. And I'm always a little bit worried that that's because I'm like accidentally heretical in some way. Okay, so it's like just, disclaimer, like I have no idea what I'm talking about. So definitely point it out to me if you see any discrepancies. But I mean, techno-optimism and hope are not the same, but certainly not Christian hope, but they're on the same wavelength, I would claim. And so the Christian hope, right, is this idea that, no matter how wrecked you are, how many bad choices you made, there's somehow like always a way back to heaven. Um, and that's a great thing, right? That's the like in the end we win, as the sort of meme people say these days. But then you go to sort of regular hope, which is more like it's possible that the good thing will happen. That's the hope. Like you can have, and then you have the sort of more, if you step then into the secular side of this techno-optimism, you could say like all problems are solvable. Something I'm a bit of a mantra of mine, but something I've definitely held on to post conversion. In the beginning, I literally thought that was the same. I now see that there is a difference, but it certainly works in the same way. Like, it works in the same way on my psyche and will, right? This idea that there are problems, but I can solve them. That's that's techno-optimism, but well, like, why? Well, it's because there's hope that I can, presumably, right? It's possible, and maybe that's all I need to figure out. Like, is it possible? And do I believe in my ability? Like, do I believe that it's worth trying? So I would say that techno-optimism read in this way can be more like kind of could almost think about it like if like in the sort of university of hope, then like the intro courses are techno optimism. It's just like it's the same degree. It's just like the intro is the earliest. It's the intro courses to that theme of hope. Where people find this to be, contradiction is about back to like do good, don't do evil. It's Fulton Sheen has this point: technology is like energy, can be used for good or evil, and some technologies can indeed be like inherently evil. Like there's something about them, so they can only be used for evil. And you definitely should make those. So I think that's. But if I were to even challenge it to the more extreme, like if I were to give myself a harder swing here, how to reconcile transhumanism and Catholicism? Okay, just to take it like to the sort of edge of this. So if you take someone who's like transhumanist in the Bay Area, and technology optimist in the Bay Area, that term has gone out of fashion, but and is today more of a slur. But it signifies something, which is this idea that you could use technology to better humans, right? To improve the human condition. And that we can somehow transcend our humanity. I guess that's what the and Peter Thiel has this point where he says that the problem with the transhumanism from his Christian point of view is like it doesn't go far enough, and the idea being that we can transcend death, not, for example, because they are often into longevity questions, can transcend death, not in not just in a biological form, but in a spiritual one as well, and that the transformation maybe needs to be not just improving the technology, the tools that you use, but maybe even to transform yourself as well. Like in that way, it doesn't go far enough. That Christianity is not against transformation; it just aims for total transformation, right? Salvation. Not just for extending biological life on earth, but for eternal life in heaven, right? It's a difference of degree. So that's how I reconcile it. I don't find it hard to reconcile. Where people find it hard to reconcile is that there are obviously within here controversial things where you can step wrong, and where a Christian would say, I can't do that because that would involve murder, or it would not treat people in the appropriate way, a sufficiently dignified way, and they're right about that. So it is a bit scary to kind of like have this techno-optimism unmoored from Christian morality. I do think that's a problem in our society, but I do think that even if we were to fully reconvert the West, I do think we would still be pretty techno-optimist. But there are some things we wouldn't do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I'm not super familiar with some of those arguments, like the transhumanism kind of movement, if you will. I understand like the longevity things, like with Brian Johnson, et cetera. But one thing I guess the way I would view that is, if you're going to build technology, you must keep in mind kind of the basics of why we're created, right? We work is good for man, for example, right? The argument that we should create a world where man no longer has to work is really bad for us, because we were called in Genesis to kind of subdue the earth and to work. It's a beneficial thing for man to do that. So if we try to remove that, that's a bad thing. So you should avoid pursuing objectives that would put all men out of work, for example, right? You wouldn't want that, and you would have to also understand like the principles of that this life is not meant to be eternity, right? That there is only one eternity, and it's not here on earth as we know it. And you'd also have to understand the principles of suffering and why suffering is okay, because we can be connected to Jesus through suffering. if we try to remove all suffering, like that's just some kind of like utopia that the devil asks us to pursue. So those would be my like when you talk about
Yes.
those things, like I would assume if you have some of those stakes in the wall, you say, okay, these are like immovable posts. I can't mess around with. Then you can probably be a techno optimist. In my opinion,
Yeah.
that would be like you just have to have some guiding principles, if you will.
I agree, and I very much agree on your suffering point. I picked up on that. I found that odd even pre-conversion. Like uh, like to me, it's like obviously suffering has a purpose. It's a signal. Like so, you can just take it away. It's not like it can't be an inherent. Like it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, after uh, converting, of course, like you see that it's almost of primary significance, and
I,
in the work of
I find it
sanctification.
super intriguing that most people who are like, oh, if there's a God, why can he allow such suffering in the world? And it's like, to me, it's so interesting because that's actually like such a interesting way that we become closer to him by like suffering with him, right? The reason you have close relationships is because you went through something together with him, right? Like I go on this pilgrimage. I didn't go last year, but for like 7 years in a row, I went on this pilgrimage where we walk 70 miles in like 3 days, 65, I think. And it's like, it's painful. It's very difficult, but we're doing it for our faith, and we're doing it in union with Christ. And I only see these people like once a year, but the relationships I forged with them over 3 days because of the kind of shared objective or the shared suffering in with a, particular unifying idea in mind, it just allows us to be so much closer, even though we almost never talk throughout the year. And I've just always found this fascinating that people ask that question when it's actually like it's very close to the core of understanding why you should really like, I guess, embrace suffering, if you will.
Then I'll add something. I mean, from this techno-optimist perspective, I would say where most people, when they convert, is not so much an activity, but an intention, right? It's just like a lot of them, underskirts is a kind of hedonistic pursuit. Like they want to live forever because they're afraid of dying. They want to take away suffering because they don't like it. Like it's not very well ordered, and that would have to go away. But I would say, like, even trying to live longer to stay healthy isn't bad, provided it's for, like, you can imagine that I have a calling and I have to stay alive to
Hmm.
complete my mission on earth that I was sent by God to do. If you, like, that's a valid reason to stay alive. um, Not in the kind of not in a way that harms human dignity
Hmm.
or something like that, but in terms of like, but within those constraints, yeah, that's a valid reason to stay alive.
I definitely agree with that. That's something I've argued with a lot of people because I was born in 1999, so I always told myself when I was young, I was like, I need to live to 102 so I can make it in 3 centuries, basically. And then I later on read a book that's like you can usually extend your life if you believe in it. If you believe like I will live longer, your mind will kind of lead you to live a healthier life, if you will. And now my objective is to live to 120, God willing, right? And some people say you're crazy for that. You shouldn't do that because that's not very Catholic. But I don't understand that because while I'm not trying to stay here forever because I don't, life is not fun all the time, right? I want to get to heaven, but I do believe that there's we each have a calling, and we must respect our bodies as temples of God, right? And you should take care of yourself. You shouldn't, eat a bunch of junk food and and never exercise and things like that. So that's a sidebar. I definitely agree with your point there. Let's put it that way. Um,
Hey, quick interruption. I swear this is the last one. If you're enjoying the show, please drop us 5 stars on your favorite podcasting platform and share the episode with at least one other Catholic entrepreneur who will enjoy it. It'll take you 30 seconds, but it'll be super helpful to us and to helping us grow. All right, back to the show.
I think one of the things I don't know if you're familiar with this is this idea of the culture wars. Kind of Balaji talks about. You probably have heard this. I'm assuming you have about the idea of taking back San Francisco for the Gray Tribe, the Internet Tribe. For those unfamiliar, um, how can Catholics do the same thing of like taking back the culture across the country or across the world for Catholicism?
That is, I really like this question. Do you mind if I just reason out loud? So it's like, what is culture? It's a I like this about the idea that it's a set of norms. It's an outcome. In a company, you work with culture a lot, right? So it's like you know that a culture, which is this like the norms, the how people interact with each other, that kind of transforms individuals into like a group, and the group way of thinking can make it into this like super entity. So you really observe in a company how it's constantly decaying. I think a lot of people aren't aware of this. It's like culture is constantly decaying through no fault of anyone. It's just sort of entropy. I mean, to use a secular word, it's just everything is just constantly falling apart and has to be renewed. Um, and and so you know, in the company I talk a lot about this, like tending weeds in a garden. I think that's a good metaphor. Like two ways, like you have to kind of plant the seeds of what you want to see. That's like talking about the values that you want. Oh, here's one key insight. What is the MVP, the minimum viable product, to use a starter term, of culture? Values. Values, and that's true in a company, that's true in society. And what the most important thing we want is vision and values. Christian vision and values. Christian vision is heaven. Okay, Christian values is truth, goodness, and beauty, faith, hope, and love, etc. Life itself is a Christian value, and if we don't explain, like we have to kind of like, that's why everyone needs to go to church every Sunday. They need to be reminded, right? That's why in a company you have to talk about your values every week. You have to be reminded. That's planting the seeds of the culture that you want. So similarly, we can do that in society, right? That's, you can do that through a state, but you can do that through social media. You can do it through any means, but it's like, how do we talk about, explain these values so that they become the reigning values in society? We have to just do it again. Okay, so that's planting the seeds of the culture that we want, is to talk about the values that we want to have, give examples, give persuasive explanations. And then number two is to take away those things that we don't want, right? So it's, if you have a garden, just by no fault of it, like weeds grow up in the garden and you have to pick those weeds. And yeah, it's very true that if you don't pick the weeds, it's not that the weeds are very strong, it's just that if you don't pick them, your garden becomes a mess. Like everyone would know that. Like if you don't pick the weeds, you have a weed garden. Like that's going to be your garden very quickly. But it's not, it doesn't take a lot of effort actually to pick the weeds. Like for like an active person, it's actually very low effort needed. And I think it's like that with a lot of things in society as well, that they're not actually protected by anyone. If you just start picking the weeds, if you say like not this, not this, not this, then they would just go away. That's not true with everything. Every now and then you come across one that has some defense, but I think you wouldn't go wrong with that model. Okay, so that's just that's the fundamental strategy, and so you want to kind of reinforce the values and the norms that you want, and then you want to de-reinforce. Argue against, punish the values and norms that you don't want, or that is, you think, polluting. And you want to take that seriously. Like one thing I think you want to do that the startup world is very good at is to take things seriously. Meaning, like, if you want to reach a goal, you have to sort of actually try to reach it and use creativity and cleverness and like whatever you can find at your disposal to get it to do it. I think that if some people were to sit down and they were like, we're actually going to change the culture, we're gonna make it so that, you know, a few years from now, 5 years from now, people are going to be like, the values of, you know, beauty and mercy and hope, you know, are going to be like things people talk about with as much carefulness as they would, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, in 2020. And I think that's totally possible. I think that like even a small group of committed, it would have a strength. You know, one great benefit of doing it for Christian values is that they're true. and so they're not random. But yeah, that's roughly how that's where I would start. What do you think?
I like that. So you're basically saying that the first principle is, especially for people with companies, you create a culture that is effectively, whether or not you're a publicly Catholic company, you are, you're creating a Christian culture inside of your company. You're talking about the things that you like, which can and kind of removing the things that you don't want, which then is like a basis to begin influencing culture is through the, let's say, the control that you have over a company to whatever extent you do have control. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, well, I would say that that analogy of a company also works on a broader societal level. Yeah, but
Are,
yes.
are there any, I guess, tactical things that you've ever observed, or if you were, if you're forced today to go out and like try to win back San Francisco for make it a Catholic culture, like what are some of the maybe tactical things you would do if that was like the majority of your effort right now?
You know, if I haven't thought a lot about this, and I think it's, so I will just say one thing I've thought about. I do think that cities today, I don't like the structure of them or the suburbs. So I think cities in particular, like you imagine people interact with each other all the time, and the sort of cultural entropy is very large. Like people think everything kind of falls apart, and people become very atomized. They're in their apartments, or in the suburbs, they're in their house, and in the suburbs are even worse. It's like the only gathering points are these like enormous malls for like 100,000 people. Um, so we need to create communities again, right? This is like we the error is large, unfortunately. That's what I think. So um, you would want to create a model. I would do it once that can be then replicated. And that's something, if we were to scale it. So I would first see like how can I create a community that has to do with living um, and and how people interact that is good and sustainable. And I'm not just talking about here like, oh, everyone kind of moved to some rural village. I do think that it can be recreated. You can take some of those like eternal principles and more recent knowledge and try to create that. But certainly the suburbs need to be structurally changed. Like it's very hard to build a society in current US suburbs. Like you probably have to literally like they should be villages. Like our suburbs should be villages. Obviously, that's what they should be. You should be a bunch of villages, not these like copy paste houses forever and then a mall. So we literally have to. That's a construction project. That's going to take 100 years. But we can build the first one. And one thing that a line that I often look at, like in my notes, that I really like about our current time is that the world is falling apart faster than ever, but it can also be rebuilt faster than ever due to the internet because we can organize people much faster today. And that's a great upside. So yeah, so that's what I would do in the suburbs. In the cities, I'm not exactly sure, but there also the material is often better because cities are often older, right? If the place I live in San Francisco, North Beach, is like a perfect model for a good, like you have this central town square, 10,000 people living around. The tallest building on that town square is this beautiful church, and like the statue in the middle of the park is like a statue of Benjamin Franklin, and then like this is such a properly ordered town square, and because of that, that is an incredibly alive community. It's kind of like the old Little Italy kind of, but it's so alive today, and like people are starting things today. Like people just started a new farmers market. There's all these like community events all throughout the year, and it's amazing to see. So it's possible. There are models that already exist. I mean, you want to go from the kind of meme formation to the community formation, right? So it's like a lot of people have discovered that you can spread knowledge online quickly, right? And actually, we're making a lot of headway in that. We have a great benefit. We have the truth. It's a great starting point. And but we have to build a pipeline from that to community. That is really the missing link, the current constraint. You have a lot of people out there who agree, and they're just looking for
But from
the
online to real life is, I think, the very difficult thing. This is something I've become very passionate about recently. It's like it does seem I would agree with you that we're making headway on on the internet. Let's say in terms of like bringing the faith back. But what's not happening is a lot of times the people who are let's call it intellectually ambitious to create that kind of online trajectory, if you will, for faith or for opportunities for faith, they are not the same people who are necessarily physically capable of turning some of those things into real life, like construction projects, for example, right? And I find that, at least in the communities I'm familiar with, the people who have, let's call them more trade like skills, they don't have the type of ambition that the more internet native people do. And there's just a kind of disconnect between how do you actually bring these things from from the internet into a real life manifestation, and you need to convince them that the people who can actually build things, that is a it makes sense, because a lot of times it's like, bah humbug, that doesn't make any sense to me. But you have to convince them, and then you have to actually get them to organize and do these things, because you can't. I find this a lot in I go to a Latin mass community. I live in a Latin mass community here in central Wisconsin, and I live in town, so I'm like, 10, 15 minutes walk from church if I want to, which is super unusual in America. But everybody else who goes to this church is kind of like spread out from all around the area. There's not like a huge conglomeration of us in town. There's a few of us who are neighbors, but not many. And I find it very much a shame, because we just have this idea that you have to drive everywhere in America. And after having lived in New York, I know that's that shouldn't be how it is, because like we can't organize a community if it's extremely if the barriers to convening and being together are very difficult. In a way, we have this kind of spread out town square with our church, but that requires every activity to be at church, rather than having kind of something really close to it where you just happen to be by somebody else. And I love this idea of rebuilding the physical infrastructure of America, or just the world, I guess you could say, in a different way, because I do think it would be more conducive also to potential conversions, right? Because if you happen to bump into somebody, there's more opportunities to see each other, to be exposed to other people's way of living. Whereas if you just drive from your place of work to maybe you stop at Starbucks on the way home, and then you just get to your suburban house and you're just with your family, there's very little opportunity to be exposed to other culture, and it's very difficult to win back the culture. So I'm very much in favor of this idea.
one last point I want to say about San Francisco is people don't realize how much San Francisco has already changed over the last few years. Like in this last election now, the sort of the reformers, like the last of the like progressive people were kicked out from the city council after having won like over the last three elections, almost like every single election. And that's a large part to kind of grow SF. And you have these things going through like on the ballot that really indicates how much things have changed. To give one example, this ballot received, I think, it was 70% in San Francisco. Yes, and it said that people who receive money from the government now have to pass a drug test, or they won't receive any money anymore. Like, and it was kind of that text in the ballot that passed by 70%. It's like San Francisco is not what it used to be 4 years ago. Like this is, it's already changed in a pretty significant way. So biology's goal is that's definitely being realized.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of him. I wish I could be as good at recalling history facts as he is, but I'd probably have to read a lot more. Okay, one last thing that we do got to cover, and it's really along the same lines, is if I understand correctly from reviewing your LinkedIn, you did spend some time in city council. Is that correct? At one point.
Yes,
So
correct.
on that, I guess idea, I at one point had considered trying to run for city council when I was here in Wausau before I moved to New York. Um, and I decided not to do it, but I noticed that not a lot of people around me, at least in my circle, kind of ever perceive the opportunity to do this? I mean, it's a small town. There's 30,000 people here. It's extremely, you could say, easy to kind of win these positions and have an influence in the culture in a civic role. So do you have any thoughts around an individual's how much they should focus on their civic engagement or their political engagement, even when it seems the majority of the culture is, very, it makes it very difficult to be a Catholic in those positions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it has to be sort of properly ordered in the sense of like, first you have to, fix yourself and your relationship with God, and then, you can, your family, and then your company. But yeah, like once you're at that point where those things, like you're not neglecting any kind of more immediate responsibilities, I think we should. And just to tell you like what's going on over there, those city councils are being ran by people who need the money or like the prestige, and it's like it's not impressive and it's just complete drift. So yeah, like if you have someone who like actually cares and are actually trying to solve problems, it's you're gonna have a lot of impact. So like, don't think that there's like a bunch of geniuses who's like, no, that's not the situation right now. Like there's a talent gap. So no, I think so. I think that we should attempt to improve the societies that we live in some way, and I think everyone, once they get past the kind of, yeah, as I mentioned, the kind of more pressing concerns, yeah, how can I contribute to my community should be a question, and there should be an answer that speaks to, of course, your strengths and talents, but I think everyone should do something.
Yeah, I'm very much of this belief. I think maybe to start wrapping things up here, there's a couple things I often think about. One is the parable of the man of the people with the talents, right, and how one person bears their talents. I think it's very, very common for, especially I would say pious Catholics, people who really like take their faith very seriously. They end up falling into the bury their talent category because I look around me in my community and I see so many really, really smart individuals, smart men with large families, but there's a severe lack of ambition and willingness to pursue what would be perceived as earthly success, I guess you could say, like, running for political office or building a company. And this idea of justice, which this will probably come out much after this, but up very soon is the Feast of the Epiphany. And I reflect on this often that the Magi, they understood through reading the text, they use their knowledge to understand, when is the Messiah going to be coming, and then instead of just knowing it, they recognized that because they believed and because they knew, they were forced to take action, and that was like I forget the numbers, like 700-mile journey or something, like extremely difficult journey that probably took them a very long time. But they were willing to translate their belief and their knowledge into action, and that is a form of justice, because if you genuinely believe that the Son of God is coming, you must act, right? And I think the same thing is true of the principle of justice, which is that we owe to many different people certain things, including our community. And I think this is something that is often overlooked with current Catholics of the I forget the exact law of the church, which one it is, around partaking in the apostolic mission of the church. And we have in justice, we have a responsibility to be part of that evangelization. We have a responsibility to, of course, our family, our parents, our siblings, our children, our community. I think this is extremely overlooked. Like, nobody picks up trash in the street because it's not my job, right? And that is something we must cultivate. It's not even necessarily a Christian virtue, technically. Justice is a human virtue, a natural virtue. And this is something I really just, if anybody's listening is on the fence about pursuing something that seems challenging, just recognize that you have a responsibility to do so. So with that, I mean, maybe the last thing I'll ask you is kind of along the same lines. The people I meet who I can tell have talent and they don't recognize what they're capable of, or they dream very small. What do you say to these people to try to get them, like, if they're going to spend some time after listening to this reflecting on, okay, should I pursue something in any of these realms? Are there any words that you would offer them as to how to guide their thought process around, do I have a call to any of these things?
Mm. Just to discern if they have a call to something great. Yeah, I would say, back to the beginning of the conversation, this point about ambition and listening to your conscience, like when something like bugs you again and again, that maybe I should write a book, maybe I should get involved in local politics, maybe I should start a company. You should definitely do that. Like, that's not like, where do you think that where is that like, if it's not drawing you to vice and sin, it's of God, and you should definitely listen to your conscience. And the fact that it's being revealed to you again and again is a very credible sign that it's you have a mission that you're ignoring, you have a calling that you're ignoring at your peril, and that things will go very bad for you if you continue to do that. So therefore, it's very hard to say what other people should do, right? But I think that's a pretty good starting point. I also think you can good, if you're more like intellectually oriented, and you haven't quite learned to listen to your conscience yet, just mapping out. I learned this, I think, in RCA, but it was like just mapping out like what are you good at, what's needed, and 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 yeah, seeing where is it likely that you can contribute the most to God's kingdom. And I like that.
Hmm.
I do think that's a question worth is worth investigating, what your purpose is, what God's will is for you, and you can do that in a methodical way. It doesn't have to be that you're. It doesn't have to be through adoration, although that should definitely be a part of it. But it shouldn't only be. I feel like many Catholics is like it's only adoration. No, you can have structured prayer,
Hmm.
um, and get somewhere further than just waiting. Um, so that would be a second part. And then I really like this idea about like neglectedness, like especially if there's something that you've been called to and no one else is doing it. I think that's such a good sign that like a calling is for you in particular. Like, yeah, if yeah, one thing is like, oh, you're getting this calling again and again, but it's like it seems like everyone else is. But if it's like you getting this thing and it seems like no one else is, see, that's for you. And so I think that's a third one. And this yeah. So and I should say, if you aren't then meeting that, like there are so many stories in the Bible that show, back to the Jonah example, right? I mean, that story is about what happens when you ignore your calling,
Mm.
and things go very badly for you and everyone else around you when you do that. And there's many other stories in the Bible that demonstrate this. So you don't get away with ignoring your calling.
Yeah. No,
Um,
this is, I think, a huge, like a huge dilemma is that it's just very difficult. It's very easy, even if you are genuinely trying to pursue your faith, it's extremely easy to be very just distracted by all the things in the world, and you don't even, especially for like traditional families that I know, like they get married young and they start having kids, and then the distractions are even higher, right? It's very difficult to like spend time reflecting on the things that you encounter each week. But those are the ways that God speaks to us. It's not like it's not very common, at least to my knowledge these days, for an angel to just appear and say, hey, you got to do this thing. uh, if you're willing to listen, God speaks to you through many of the minor things that happen in your life. But I think that you must have some sort of time every day, it's ideally, to reflect on these things. Because if you're not spending the time to reflect, you're never going to recognize when he's speaking to you, right? And that's just something I think it's very difficult, and it's so easy to make excuses for it. Say, I'm just too busy with the kids or with work or whatnot. And at the end of the day, like that is part of our calling. Is we're put here by God not for our own benefit, right? Like he gives us skills not for our own benefit. He gives us skills so that we can use them to advance his kingdom through him. It's nothing of ourselves. It's all through him because we're incapable of anything on our own. But we have to use those skills. So I'm sure we could talk probably for days on this stuff. But let's wrap it up here. Any last words of things you want to share?
No, just awesome that you're doing this podcast. Love the questions, honest, reflective. I'm really curious to see where this is going to go. So I'll definitely become a listener.
Appreciate that, man. Really, really, really welcome it. So awesome. Well, for everybody else, thanks so much for tuning in.
Hey, thanks so much for listening all the way through. If you made it this far, you're very committed. You may find the Catholic Founders community to be very valuable. Again, if you made it this far, like this, probably something you're interested in. Not many people will go all the way through. So consider becoming a founding member to join the peer group that we've built. And as a heads up, like I said, our next episode is going to be with Trevor Alcorn, most likely, unless I put out some other special content in the meantime. But Trevor Alcorn is one of the founders of Tridentine Brewing, a very cool Catholic beer company out of Chicago. Or I shouldn't say Chicago. They'd probably be upset. They're south of Chicago, in Illinois, I think Kankakee area. And it's definitely a change of pace, but it's very, very fun. Something that I think a lot of people will find interesting because it's just like a totally different topic set that we've been going through so far. Because it's a different kind of business, right? It's not a tech business, so it's very interesting. That episode is likely to come out in 2 weeks. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I'm traveling currently, so I don't know how much time I'm going to get to edit new content to put it out. So ingest if you want to this content again, this episode again. Maybe take some notes. And maybe you'll have to, I don't know, find another podcast to listen to in the meantime. But I'm visiting family in New York City, so the schedule's a little bit wacky. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us today again. And God bless you and happy building.